welcome to our Resilience Matters series. We're doing something a little bit different today. As you may be aware, Alice and I have built the 6 thinking habits that builds mental strength and resilience. And we thought what we'd do is focus on some of those habits individually. And we do have a habit called I am positive and optimistic. And we both agreed there was only one person we could possibly invite to interview for that. And that is the amazing Mark Cooper, who's a leadership expert and the MD of Cooper and Lansbury Associates. So, we've worked together for a long time, haven't we, Mark? And probably one of the most positive people I know.
Definitely.
Always leave the room a little bit happier than when you started, I feel. So
I moved.
So tell us about yourself, Mark.
Well, Kathy, thank you, and delighted to be here. And may I just say, I've never really thought of myself as being Mr. Positive. It's only when you sort of said that, I thought, well, I probably do have a fairly sunshiny outlook on life. But thank you. What an opening. I'll see if I can top that. Kathy and I and Alison, we've worked together for a number of years now, but my background is very much in the leadership and soft skills sphere, particularly around building communication skills, training people to be positive, upbeat and impactful presenters. And I work with a variety of different clients across a whole spectrum of different sectors and industries, retail through to airports. Retail and airports have been a bit quiet for obvious reasons over the past few years, banks, insurance companies, and the construction sector. I set my business up about 8 years ago, having been an in-house learning and development expert for a number of years. When I realised, do you know what? What I'm doing is not exclusive to the construction sector, which is where I was at the time. And I thought I could work with different types of company business, moving away from just being B2B to B2C, looking at the end customer as well. And it was when I started off building the business, I thought, gosh, as an individual setting out on that road, you need to develop an element of resilience. Because it's just you yourself and I sitting around making decisions on things. And I think coming back to your point, Kathy, about positivity, it was at that point I started to think, I have a fairly upbeat and glass half full view of the world. Where that comes from and where it stems from, I don't quite know. There's an element that I think is natural. There's an element that I think has been born out of drinking a lot of orange juice early in the morning and getting on. And that's sort of where I am now. That's the sphere I work in. I actually started my career as a school teacher, but I developed a deep pathological fear of children fairly rapidly. So working with adults hasn't proved to be massively different, but possibly slightly more lucrative. So that in a nutshell is me. Although my background, interestingly, before getting into the L&D sphere, isn't anything to do with industry or nor do I have an MBA. My background and my degree certainly are much more foreign languages orientated, and I majored in medieval French poetry, which has not really lent me any particular skills or expertise in the leadership sphere.
But you've had fun doing it, right?
I have, yes. And I do like to look at most things that I do on a day-to-day basis, working with clients or working with delegates. It's got to be fun. Life is terribly short if you're not having fun. And if you can't make something fun, then actually, what is the reason behind doing it? And there are some really good reasons for doing things that aren't fun, obviously. But most things, and we talk a lot in the sector about gamification, but most things can be made to be fun and upbeat. And I think if you're working with someone who is, let's say, sapping the fun from an experience, you're not going to learn from it, and you're certainly not going to use it as a memory that you want to tap back into. So people find training that is dull or unexciting, unmemorable. It's not something they would ever refer back to.
Yeah, we know, don't we, that actually, if you've got positive emotions associated with learning, it'll stick with you longer. So
Absolutely. And in advance of the session today, I was thinking about how one goes about developing emotional resilience. And I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a naturally resilient type of person. In fact, going through this process, I suddenly thought, I'm tapping into all the negative aspects of what I do and what I'm not so good at. But I think going along the way, the more cognizant you become of those things that perhaps are not your strengths in resilience, you come up with a coping strategy. But you're right, as an absolute, that people remember things that are fun. People remember things that actually have motivated them to get up and do something different.
There is actually, just to correct that, not correct, well, correct myself. There is a flip side to this, which is also, if you're absolutely terrified or have a very, very negative emotion, you will also remember it as well. But obviously, as facilitators and trainers and coaches, we don't want to go there.
No, indeed. Although I do remember someone telling me at a very young age, in fact, I was at school, about the sort of memories that stick. The first time you have the vomiting bug, it's the one thing that you remember from your childhood. You're very cautious about, what you eat afterwards. But it's true. There's really emotive experiences that actually hook themselves onto a major emotion you're going to retain for a long period of time.
And so it's interesting that you talk about, do things that brings you fun, and I guess that's what gives you energy and keeps you positive. But like you say, sometimes that's not, you're not able to do that. So how do you still stay positive when you're in a situation that you might not want to be in, but that doesn't bring you joy? But
well, it's a really good question, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't take a lot of energy. There are things that I find naturally exciting and want to go and do, and sometimes I have to curb my enthusiasm. I will go into certain things and I can get a bit carried away at meetings because I am very upbeat, and you need to apply a filter in certain situations because it's not always appropriate to be full of energy and full of buzz. I'm never the person who's sent in to lay people off under redundancies. I'm not possibly the right choice for that. But there are situations where you have to insert a lot of energy, particularly when it's working with those people who perhaps have a leaning towards being more negative or looking at the darker side of things or thinking, I can't do this. And I find that exhausting. And in fact, Alison and I were having a conversation probably about 6 weeks ago about how tiring doing what we all do around the table can be on a day-to-day basis. You can't have an off day. You can't, as a facilitator or as a trainer, go into a room and say, life's terrible, I've had a really bad drive here. You've got to be on, and I use the word on as in sort of switched on and hyped up and motivated. And that's, for me, can be a challenge in certain situations, particularly if I don't know the topic very well, if I don't really buy into it. And my coping strategies around that have been almost using a little bit of NLP and thinking about anchoring and thinking about positivity in terms of what you're doing to serve others. And one of the big things I learned during lockdown has been exactly based on that. Everything you do or everything you say is either a service or a disservice, both to yourself, but also to other people. And actually, you could go into a situation, a training room, a group of people, it could be outside of work, and you're thinking, I don't want to do this, or this so isn't me. And actually, what you're doing there is you're focusing all the attention on you and not on what the other person may be taking away from this. So whilst it might not be something you're going to enjoy, the other person actually needs to be at the forefront of your mind. And that requires a little bit of training, a little bit of mental assiduity. You've got to apply yourself to that because naturally, we always think of ourselves first. We tap into our own feelings before we tap into other people's feelings, unless, of course, someone's coming to you and they're looking distressed, and you think, right, humanistically, I need to help. We tend to think about, well, how am I feeling about this? So yes, it does require a bit of energy. When I find myself lacking that energy, it's almost like having to have a talk with myself. Come on, Mark, cheer yourself up. This isn't going to last days and days. There's always a silver lining, no matter what it is. I firmly believe you can focus on the positives. If you're doing a very long training session in a very cold room, my positive is, right, well, we'll do something energetic to warm people up and we'll all enjoy it, rather than dwelling on the fact that actually this is going to be hard work.
Yeah.
It's almost on its head.
And I agree, Mark. I think, that there are always positives. We sometimes talk about gratitude diaries and things like that to bring that out and to remind us, actually, what did we learn today? There's always something. To be positive about. I agree.
I think what we have to do though sometimes is to be careful about that energy thing though, because if you've got a day when you're loving it, the people in your group are loving it, the energy sort of and the dynamics can be quite amazing, and you go away sort of like topped up with energy. Whereas there can be times when actually, you're probably giving out more energy than you're getting back. And that's when you kind of need those boundaries and that space and that time to sometimes then recharge again, so you can do that again. Because I don't think I know a single trainer who doesn't say that training is exhausting at times. And that to me is when it's exhausting, when you're putting everything in, but actually maybe you're not getting the same back. And so you're a little bit depleted at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and of course, you don't necessarily recognise that you are depleted, that you're lacking energy. The symptoms of that manifest themselves before perhaps you're cognizant of that fact. So you'll be irritable or short with someone. You'll come in the front door and just go, "Oh, can't believe that hasn't happened," or "Why, oh why? Have I still not had that letter from whoever it might be?" And I think, coming back to what you were saying about self-compassion a minute ago, and those positivity diaries and the joy jars, that's really important, because it can be quite easy. And I wrote this down actually before today's talk, just thinking, one of the things I've learned is not to dwell on situations when they haven't gone as well as you would like them to. And I'm hugely guilty about that. I will come out of a session absolutely buzzing about it, and hopefully the delegates are as well. And then if there's one adverse word or one line in the feedback I thought that could have been better, everything else that's been brilliant, which is 99.9% of it, and that's not blowing my own trumpet, I hasten to add, it has been, but that 0.1% is the bit that I then go and think about and think, gosh, this is terrible. How could somebody feel this? And my learning, and it's had to be something I've really focused on, is not to go and dwell on it, not to think back about it. And for years, I when things are going bad, I think, oh, I remember that time 7 years ago when I upset someone. You think, well, this is just counterproductive. This does no any good at all. And coming back to my point about disservice, it does a disservice to myself, because then it affects the mood I'm in and actually starts to extract some of the energy. So you're no good for anyone.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we're human, right? And we consciously, it's part of our makeup. We do focus on the negatives because that's what keeps us safe. We're scanning all the time for negative things, which is why we do pick up on that. I think the tricky bit is we know that, but letting it go. I think, like to your point, that negative thing, all those years ago, how do you, let that go to some degree?
Absolutely, and it is really hard to do. And there's loads of different techniques about almost, visualizing it in a box and sending it away, or using exactly the terminology you just said a minute ago, Kathy. We are all human. Although I like the way you said we are all human, right? Like you were just testing, because yes, but we are all human. You can't go through life without upsetting people. You can't go through life actually totally immune to all of those things that life's going to throw at you. And if you did, is that really a life well lived? In fact, I remember my father saying, and he's a bit of a Marmite character, but he said at the end of his career when he was coming up to retirement, I've upset so many people on the way, but I've also pleased so many people and changed what people do. And you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the Queen said before she passed away, grief is the price of love. It's that checkered existence. All those good things that we get, there's always going to be the juxtaposition to it. But I have learned not to dwell on it so much, and actually just go, oh, come on, what's the point? Worry is a totally useless response. I think it provides no adrenaline. It doesn't make your performance better. But telling someone not to worry doesn't work. You've got to focus on something to do instead. So when I'm starting to get, oh dear, that didn't go so well, remind yourself of all the stuff that has gone well.
Yes.
And if that's been recorded or is in your joy jar or your, I don't know, your happiness log, whatever it may be, go back into it. There's nothing indulgent about that. That's about actually just reminding yourself of what has been successful.
You kind of want to almost drown out the negativity, don't you? But it's like the weight of the little thing that you could have done a little bit better compared to all the wonderful comments about how you are and the difference you've made and how much they've enjoyed the session. The weight is quite amazing, isn't it? If you put it on the scales, that one thing has got so much more power, or can have, if we give it. so much more power and weight. We've got to up the weight of all the positivity.
I,
We've got to up the weight of all the negativity. And I think that's the tricky bit, isn't it? If you put it on the scales, that one thing has got so much more power, or can have, if we give it so much more power and weight. We've got to up the weight of all the positivity.
You're absolutely right. And you just used the term there, drowning out. And I think sometimes I found myself guilty of, I'm not going to think about it because I haven't got time to. My diary is so packed. But by the same token, if you think to your 6 habits, actually taking time to sit back and reflect on how things have gone is really key as well. And I sometimes don't particularly go out and search or seek feedback because I'm afraid of that criticism. But actually, that criticism, if it's intended in a positive way, is only there to help. So see it as a positive rather than it didn't go very well. I'm useless at this.
Yeah, and I think everybody's like that. You think of appraisals and that kind of stuff. Yeah, like you say, it's a gift, but you would focus on those negative feedbacks.
Totally, and it's one of my bugbears. I work with some really quite big blue chip companies, and we go in and I talk to them about the appraisal process and setting objectives and reviewing team members, and everyone looks horrified by the PDP, the PDR process, the appraisal. But actually, it shouldn't be a negative experience. If anything, it should be a wonderful experience where you get feedback and know what you're doing well, but also, if no one's ever told you what good looks like, how can you possibly reach or attain the targets that a business is setting? So I think, particularly in the West, we don't really use appraisals the way we should do. I think there's a lot to be said about it being an empowering and positive experience, and it's not delivered well, and therefore people see it as oh dear, here comes the annual knuckle wrap.
Yeah, totally. And it is that positioning, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've probably gone off site on a tangent.
No, not at all.
We always go on tangents, Mark.
Yeah, I see appraisals as a positive thing anyway. So
yeah,
but it's positioning, as with all these things, and it's that so we're not saying to people you've got to be toxically positive and go, oh my God, the world is amazing, and because let's be realistic, we are living in a challenging world. But at the same time, it's saying, what can I get out of any challenging situation? What opportunities are there? How can I take the good from it? Because I would say 99.99%, there's always some good somewhere, and it's looking for that.
There is absolutely, and if you see those opportunities as an opportunity to learn, there's no such thing as can't teach an old dog new tricks. Every day you should be picking up something new, and I think I've been probably a little bit resistant to that, sadly. But you're right. There'll be a positive that comes of it. So I'm just going to tell you briefly a story because you've just reminded me.
Please do.
So, in fact, you'll know one of the people who I'm referring to here. About 3 years ago, I was working with a colleague called Anita Ryan, who works a very similar sphere. She was project managing a project where I was training, and she gave me some very honest feedback. And it's not often that people who you get on well with give you honest feedback. In fact, I think we should seek it more. But Anita said something that sort of struck me. And I'd never heard it phrased that way. And it comes back to that on question I mentioned a minute ago. Anita said, Mark, she's Irish, but I won't do the accent because it's racist. She said, Mark, you're brilliant when you're switched on. Absolutely fantastic. I thought, oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much. But do you know what? It's okay to be switched off as well. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And reading between the lines, which I possibly shouldn't have done, but I thought, maybe I'm a bit exhausting to be around. And I appreciate sometimes I can be over positive, but it was a really useful thing to hear, because it is okay to be off or okay to not be okay. Yeah. And actually every human being is like that. And it took a good couple of weeks for it to really sink in, but I'm much more aware now when I'm with a large group of people, all day. I don't have to be the one talking or entertaining or, dance monkey dance. I can actually sit there quite quietly and let other people contribute and interact the way that they would like to do. And it's moments like that where you can learn from something that I don't think we necessarily actually have enough of in life, but when we do, we don't pay enough attention to.
And like you say, I think if you're wearing the mask or you feel like you're performing and you're not feeling like that inside, although there's a lot of benefits as in acting as if, because that cognitively we want to follow that. but actually it's exhausting, right?
It is. And coming back to the first point about being positive, I am naturally a positive person. I tend to see the good in most things. I tend to think that, well, whatever's going to happen, do you know what? Unless they are, no one's holding me down and is actually torturing me. That hasn't happened, I hasten to add. So there are positive things to find in most situations, but it can be a real challenge when you're surrounded by people who are being negative and are sapping you of all that. Pull yourself out of it. But it's okay to feel that way. Wearing a mask, I probably do a fair bit. I sometimes will come home and do exactly the same. In fact, when people see me outside of work, they're slightly surprised that I'm exactly the same as I am inside work. This is what I'm like. But I do occasionally recognise that, I don't feel good. Why is this so hard? And it's because I'm a human, and actually, my energy has been taken by others, and it's okay to go away and sit down quietly and actually recoup.
And I think there's a tip there as well about surrounding yourself with other positive people that you do get energy from as well.
You're absolutely right. Sometimes you don't choose or can't choose who you're surrounded by, and there's always going to be someone who is a bit of a morale hoover in your circle that sucks some of the joy out of situations. But choose carefully how you allocate your time to those people.
I think that's the thing. I've always found it very strange when they have this whole thing about, don't, surround yourself by positive people, don't hang around negative people. Sometimes you can't help it. So, I'm going to throw my father in. I speak to a negative man. I know he'll never watch this, so it's okay. I speak to a negative man between 5 and 5:30 every day. Energy wise, but then what I've done recently, I found this ridiculous song by PSY, the Korean guy, and I've made it Dad's ringtone, and so the little song comes on just before I start speaking to Dad, so it just gives me that extra boost so I can just get through the phone call and come out the other side and not feel completely drained.
Brilliant.
I just needed it. I was like, how can I do this? I was like, put that song on. It's like, he's the only person who's got a special ringtone on the phone, and it comes on and it just makes me laugh. Then I pick up the phone and listen to half hour of whatever's wrong with the world.
Yeah. and actually, we all have to do that. We all have to do that in our lives. We have to do that with people in work, outside of work. And you're right. Sometimes it's about finding, okay, so what is the sugar coating to this that's going to make it all better? Is it that picked me up before, or is it, if I've had a long conversation like that with someone, I'm going to go and have a really big chocolate bar afterwards as a result of endorphin release?
That was the problem. It was a large glass of wine. I was like, need to stop the large glass of wine. Let's just put the little ringtone on.
Well, on my positivity tips, I do enjoy a drink. I think both of you would probably affirm that. But it has a very short-lived life span. The very big glass of wine, and I would quite happily have 3 or 4 large glasses of wine. But I have discovered, certainly during lockdown, less is more. One glass just picks me up, and then I will stop. Otherwise, it becomes it can heighten the emotion, possibly not in the way you want.
I'm liking the fact that you've got some positivity tips. So, have you got other positivity tips to share with us?
Well, I did not because I naturally think about these things to do them. I just naturally do them without thinking about them. But I'm a morning person. My wife is not. So to give you an example, my wife set the alarm this morning for 5:30 and then just put it on snooze about 7 times, at which point I was getting slightly irritated. When I set the alarm, I aim to actually be awakened to switch the alarm off before it goes off, and then just do it. So the big one for me, whenever I don't want to do something, and there's loads of things I don't want to do, I don't particularly like picking up the phone and speaking to people I don't know. My best tip is do it now. Do it before you thought about it and made a mountain out of a molehill. If it's something on your to-do list that you really are putting off, just do it, because then the rest of the day is a joy. And I am an early riser. So my best tip is, if you're an early riser, make the most of those few hours before the energy starts to wane. So I try and do most of the stuff that is rebarbative, stuff that I could take up an entire day. If I've got it done by 9:30, you've suddenly got a day that you can use really productively. So I really do make the effort to actually get most of that stuff out of the way first thing.
Love that.
And the other thing for me is when you wake up, every day is a new day, and every day is going to be a good day if you've chosen for it to be a good day. If you wake up with that sense of, oh, I really don't want to do this, the rest of the day is going to be oh, what an awful day. If you think, do you know what, today's going to be brilliant, then actually 8.5 times out of 10 it's going to be really good, because you started with the attitude, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You reap what you sow.
Mm.
And the final
Totally.
thing is drink orange juice. It's a great pick me up in the morning. But the other tip is with orange juice, don't drink it after 2 p.m. It's full of vitamin C and it will prevent you from sleeping.
Oh.
Oh,
So fresh fruit later in the day is never a good idea. Just, that's
who
70s.
knew?
I know. I did some research on it. That's how I know.
Who knew? Maybe that's why your wife's so tired. Maybe she had orange juice too
Yes.
late. Didn't sleep well.
Yes, it was the Satsuma I gave her at 10 o'clock last night.
Do you know what? Honestly, as always, it's a joy, Mark, to be around you. And as I say, you can see, hopefully people can see what I always say, always feel a little bit better.
Oh,
Speaking to you than beforehand, bring a smile. And I guess, that's how we can all help other people as well, to
absolutely.
be positive and bring it out of others as well.
Do you know, you really, we all give off a vibe, and I can see instantly when I go into a room who I'm going to enjoy talking to throughout the day, or the person who comes up and starts their introduction to you with a sigh, and you think, this is going to be a tough conversation. If you can sow the seed, and it's simple things like smiling, making eye contact, thinking about positive stuff, rather than starting the conversation as we Brits often tend to do with, God, isn't the weather dire? And hopefully this year we haven't really had much recourse to say that, because it's been a wonderful year for vitamin D. But if you can give off some of that positivity, I genuinely think you will get much more positive interactions back from others. Most things can be done. And if they can't be done, don't dissect why not. Find what can be done instead. Move on from it rather than focusing on the, on the can'ts.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, do you know what? It's been brilliant, Mark, and I'm glad this is going to be on LinkedIn and YouTube to refer back to. If I'm ever having a day, I'm going to go back and watch it as a little broadcast to refer back to.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure. Rest assured, I'm never going to look back at it, because hearing my own voice and seeing myself on screen is the least comfortable thing I find. Feel free to file it where I can't see it.
Okay, I won't send you the link, Mark. I won't.
Thanks, Mark.
But thank you. And to our viewers, if you want to find out more about our 6 thinking habits, of which Mark has kindly talked us through the positive and optimistic, you can find it all on our website, which is i'vegottthis.co.uk. We've also got lots of free resources, diagnostics, 101 ways to build mental strength, some other videos. So please do feel free to have a little look around and consume at your leisure. So thank you both, and I will catch up with you soon.
Bye.
Good luck seeing you. Many thanks indeed. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.